Hello, everybody. This is Marty Marion. Welcome to the Master Course. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most important underlying principles in the science of positioning and depositioning and competitive advantage. We've talked in previous sessions, and we're going to talk more about what you need to do to compel your targets, whether they're consumers or clients, or customers, to be positively influenced in your favor and to be moved away in their minds from believing that your competitors provide a viable option. That being said, we're going to spend time today talking about the subject of influence. We're all under influences constantly. From the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed, we see messages, we see images, we see ads, we see social media posts, we hear our friends talking to us in person, on the phone, online. We get emails, and we also have experiences. We eat something, we drink something, we decide what shirt we're going to put on, or what pair of shoes to wear today, or what we're going to make for dinner tonight. We think about what we might want to do over the weekend. Do we want to accept that invitation to a friend's party? We think about things we need to buy. Do we need to buy a laptop, or do we need to buy new razor blades? And everything in between. So we're constantly bombarded by opportunities. And these are opportunities to basically make many decisions, yes or no, or sometimes maybe. How people make decisions is critically important for you to know when you're crafting your positioning platforms, when you're writing your ads, when you're creating your marketing content, because there is a very particular process by which everybody makes their decisions. Now, there may be nuances and variances between the way I make decisions and the way any of you might make decisions about the same subject. Which pair of shoes am I going to wear today? To me, maybe that's an unimportant decision. To you, on any given day, it could be an unimportant decision, minor decision, or it could be a really important decision because you're going to a job interview, or you're meeting a client, or you're going out to dinner with someone special. So there are all these factors that swirl around how people make decisions. What is causing them to make certain types of decisions? And if we understand that, then we can craft our messages so that when we speak them and when we present them in written format on websites or in social media or in ads, we're playing into this consumer decision-making process. And there's a huge amount of psychology involved in this. And there's a huge amount of factual formulation, meaning there's a very specific order in which our brains process information. And we process different types of information at different levels of importance, and different types of information have different levels of impact on how we go about making these decisions. And if our objective is to get our targets to make a decision in our favor. Hire my agency, not those other guys. Buy my product, not those other products. Use my services, not those other services. Then we need to understand and we need to play into, and most importantly, we need to control what's going on in the mind of our target in a very particular order. And there are very particular strategies and very specific tactics that we use to achieve this in positioning science. And with that said, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to jump in to the master course. Today, we're going to talk primarily, but not exclusively, about a concept called ladders. And there are several different types of ladder scenarios that we're going to go through. We're going to talk about competitive buying decisions and the role of influences. The word influence is pretty self-explanatory. It means having an impact on the way you think. But when we use influence, we're really talking about it in a more tangible, more touchable, more packageable format. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what influences how consumers and clients or your targets make these kinds of decisions. And then we're going to go through two of the specific ladders. And at the end, we're going to talk about what's coming next week, and you don't want to miss that. So everybody knows I like to do a quick recap first. In the prior session, we talked about the two critical movers. The first one being doubt, which is intended to shake our targets' current beliefs. We want to cause our targets to doubt that whatever products or services they're using today or engaged with today may not be providing them the results, the benefits, the solutions that they were hoping. So doubt is very powerful. If we can plant a seed of doubt in the mind of our target about our competitors, those question marks that we place in our target's minds, they kind of grow, they fester, they swell, they nag at you, because as humans, we're kind of hardwired to solve problems, to answer unanswered questions in our mind. The second critical mover is the ability to create an actual state of dissatisfaction in the mind of our target, meaning we want to prod and move our target to the point where they're not just doubting whether they're getting the results they were promised or that they hoped for, but to make a determination that they aren't, and therefore they're unhappy about that state. They're dissatisfied, they're displeased, maybe even a bit angry. Because when someone is truly dissatisfied with a current situation, they take stronger steps to change it. And they're very, very vulnerable at that moment to being open to whatever it is that we're offering them. So doubt and dissatisfaction are the two most powerful ways to move someone's current state of mind away from where we don't want them to be and towards where we do want them to be. We talked about the concepts of unbinding, binding, rebinding, basically meaning if our target is already feeling an affinity for a particular other agency or other brand or other line of product, they're bound to that. And before they're free in their mind to make a shift, we have to separate them. We unbind them. and we unbind them using the two critical movers, doubt and dissatisfaction. But once they're unbound, or once they're starting to become unbound, we have an opportunity to rebind them, to get them bound to us. And that's where our meaningful benefit comes in. So we use depositioning to create doubt and dissatisfaction. And then we use our meaningful benefit to bind or to move our targets to become bound to us. We talked about this moment of realization. You know, sometimes you don't know what you don't know until somebody points it out to you. So it's entirely possible that, and I'll just pick on the example of a PPC agency. If you're providing PPC services and there's a target client that you really want, maybe there's an opportunity to talk to them, or maybe they're checking out what's available out there. And all along they've thought they've been getting a great service and they're pretty happy with it, and they're getting certain ROAS on their ads. And you plant this seed of doubt or dissatisfaction. What do you mean you're only getting a 2.3 ROAS? What do you mean? Well, in your category, you should be getting at least a 4.5 ROAS. Now that causes doubt. Maybe it can be moved into a state of dissatisfaction. But there's a moment when your target realizes, this is where I am, but that's where I want to be. So I need to do something. I need to change something. I need to upgrade something. And that's where we have the opportunity to come in and say, let me show you how we do it. Because when your target has that light bulb moment where they believe and they come to understand that there is this discrepancy, there's a gap between where they are and where they want to be, we have the opportunity to bring them there. And we do all of this with one objective in mind. We're looking to gain competitive advantage over our competitors. But as I said earlier, competitive advantage is not only affected by our direct actions. We know that consumers behave based on what they believe. We know that beliefs don't happen overnight. Beliefs form, they kind of gel out of a series of experiences and perceptions and messages and inputs and pressures. And all of these are momentary opportunities to exert influence. And there are internal pressures and there are external pressures. The internal pressures are what goes on in my own head. I have this really big meeting today, and should I wear a suit or should I go business casual? These are things that go on in my head that cause me to move my thinking in one direction or another. There are external pressures. The external pressure might be blatantly expressed from the outside. We're having a party tonight and it's black tie. Well, now I have to get my tuxedo ready. But an external pressure can also be what you assume the other party is expecting, and that's a dangerous territory. So we need to understand that our targets have these internal pressures going on. What if I make the wrong mistake? What if I pick the wrong agency? What if I spend too much money? What if my ads don't work? What if my SEO isn't getting me ranked? What if my ads get rejected by Facebook? And the external pressures of what are my board of directors going to think, or my shareholders, if my margins don't go up, or my quarterly returns aren't what they need to be. So we have internal and external pressures that we just need to be aware of. And we need to understand that these other factors, besides what we do, can impact a consumer pretty strongly, or a client. And it changes something in their mind when they're going through this decision-making process. So we want to know, how can we better exert control over these factors that we might ordinarily not believe we can control? Aha, but we can. The way consumers and clients behave is based on their beliefs, right? But their beliefs are really, if we're going to sum it up in one quick catchphrase, their beliefs are the result of a series of influences or influential moments. There are some types of beliefs that can form rather quickly, like, don't stick your finger in the electric socket. You're going to learn very quickly not to do it again. Because that belief, based on the experience moment of feeling that massive electric shock and getting thrown across the room, is going to change the way you believe about the sanity of sticking your finger in an electric socket. So that experience moment is going to change the way you approach that situation in the future. Other types of beliefs can take longer to gel. What's your favorite brand of shampoo? It's not a life-changing decision, but it's still something that maybe you're going to try a couple of different brands or a couple of different fragrances, and you're going to see which one makes your hair cleaner and shinier. And maybe it takes a few times of trying different brands of shampoos to come to that kind of a decision. There are some types of beliefs that are just absolutely rock solid. Maybe these are not the kinds of beliefs that we can easily impact. For example, I'm a strict vegan. Well, you know what? You can invite me to your steak and hamburger barbecue, but I'm not having any. If we understand the type of belief that we're dealing with, we can modify not only what our message says, but how we convey that message. And there are other types of beliefs that are more fickle. I love chocolate ice cream the most. No, wait, I'm going to have some vanilla. Wow, that's delicious. Wait, no, pistachio. And only when we understand the nature of the belief type that we're dealing with do we have the weapons and the information that we need to craft our positioning and depositioning messages to impact these. But you'll notice all of these come from something that happened in the past. And all of these events that happened in the past, everything I've read, everything I've heard, everything I've seen, everything I've personally touched, everything my good friend has told me about something, these are all moments of perceptions, moments of influences. And they add up. And they add up very strongly. But every type of perception, every type of influence, let me say this a little differently. Every experience of a moment of perception, every experience of a moment of being influenced doesn't carry the same level of weight. So if we want to be more efficient, in our marketing. We want to be more efficient in attracting new clients and customers to us and pulling them away from our potential competitors. And we want to deploy the kinds of perceptions and the types of influences that are going to have stronger power. We know that positioning and depositioning, when you craft them properly, can have a massive impact on these perception moments. But even more so, if you can support it by actual experiences of influence. I'm going to explain this a little more deeply. Since consumers behave based on their beliefs, and once a belief is formed, we know it's hard to modify. We want to use positioning and depositioning, if we can, not only to shake up an existing belief, but more valuably, to exert influence on perceptions that are responsible for the formation of certain types of beliefs. And we want these beliefs to compel our targets' minds to think in favor of the concept that we're going to provide the solution they're looking for. We're going to fulfill the desires that they have. We're going to solve their problem. And we're going to want at the same time to get them to a point of belief that our competitors cannot solve their problem, fill their needs, or resolve their pain points. So there's this massive amount of information out there. And if you Google something like, what influences consumer decisions, you're going to find that there are 5 common factors influencing consumer behavior. This is from a very credible research consortium called iResearch. But if you look down the Google page a little further, you're going to see that, well, there are actually 10 factors that influence your purchase decisions. And this is from Psychology Today. Very credible. Well, let's keep scrolling. Wait, there are 4 important factors that influence consumer behavior. Wait, purchase decisions. 9 things you need to know to influence customers. 7 important factors that influence the buying decision of a customer. The 6 principles of influencing consumer decisions. The 8 factors that influence consumer behavior the most, from Integria. My mind is spinning. Seriously? Well, are there 5 factors or 6 factors or 8 factors or 10 factors? All of this is complete truthful garbage. Yeah, there's a lot of great information in here, but this isn't the way we need to think about it. If we want to influence consumer decisions, it's very simple. Positioning and depositioning are what control perceptions. And perceptions lead to the formation of beliefs, and beliefs dictate buying behavior. Now, if we just look at this for a minute and work it backwards, we want the buying behavior. So we need to have an influence and an impact on the perceptions that are going to form the beliefs that are going to result in the buying behavior. And working one step backwards, we know that we do this through positive positioning in favor of our brand and depositioning away from our competitors. This is it. So positioning and depositioning properly crafted is done through creating events and experiences and inputs that manifest what I call influence moments. And we use the concept of a ladder to illustrate two different aspects of this. So we're going to go through the ladder of brand preference, and then we're going to look at the ladder of influence. Let's start with the ladder of brand preference. The ladder of brand preference demonstrates how the majority of consumers, and when I say consumers, I also mean clients and customers, how the majority would and actually do make their buying decisions. And as I illustrate this, I hope it becomes clearer in your mind. And I'm going to give credit to Jack Trout and Al Ries, who first conceived of this concept and articulated it and coined the term positioning back in 1969 in a seminal book called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind. And I use this a lot. And I worked with both Trout and Ries personally, live, learned a lot from them. But I saw that they were not quite at the finish line of this concept of positioning and depositioning. And I took it many, many levels further. And in the last 35 or 40 years, I've used this evolution of what they started for some of the world's largest marketing and ad agencies and some of the world's largest and most famous brands. I'm going to show all of this to you over the next couple of sessions. But here's what Trout and Ries said. They said that for every category, consumers have a ladder in their mind. So now think about all the categories that impact your life. You have a toothpaste ladder. You have a beverage ladder. You have an automobile ladder. You have a brand of shoes ladder. You have a how you dress ladder. Every possible category you can think of, there's a ladder. And consumers, humans, clients, decision makers, they have right now some brand or some agency or some service sitting on each rung of that particular ladder in their mind. And the higher the rung that a particular brand or service or agency occupies in their mind, the more likely it is that that person will choose that brand when they need to make that kind of a decision. I'm going to show this to you visually. So here's a very simplified example. Quick. In your mind, and I don't want you to think about this, don't dissect it, don't sweat over this. First thing that comes to your mind, first brand that jumps into your mind. Quick, name a German luxury car. Okay, pencils down. Some of you might think BMW. Some of you might have said Mercedes-Benz. Some of you might say Porsche. Well, if we expand this concept, if everybody in the world, when they were asked, quick, name a German luxury car, responded with BMW, then BMW would be the leading German luxury car brand in the world, and it would outsell every other German luxury car. It would become the #1 brand in the category German luxury cars. So what you need to do is you need to look at your category. Are you an SEO consultant or an SEO agency? Are you a PPC agency? Are you a copywriter? Are you a web developer? Are you a schema writer? Are you a local specialist? What is it that you do? What's your category in broad strokes? And then ask, if I were to ask a number of potential likely targets who know my category, where does my brand sit on the ladder in their mind? What would they say? So going back to my example where everybody said BMW, in the brand preference ladder of the category German luxury car, whoever sits on the top rung of that mental ladder is the brand leader. Whatever brand sits on the second rung is the #2 brand in that category. Whoever sits on the third rung is the #3 brand in that category. And whoever sits on the fourth rung is the #4 brand in the category. Now, I want to make a point. Would we all love to be #1 in our category? Sure. That's why we use the category class approach to create a brand new category. But there's room for more than one. Let's suppose that you were in the soft drink industry and you produced a cola beverage. Well, certainly Coca-Cola is the largest in the world, doing very well. And #2 is Pepsi-Cola. You know what? Pepsi's not doing very badly. It's great to be #2 in that category, multi-billion-dollar industry. So it's okay to be #2 or even #3. The bigger the category, the more room there is to play in the top several positions. When you create a category class, by default on day one, you're sitting on the top rung because there are no others. So your job then is to defend that position. What we're trying to do in competitive advantage science by using positioning, using depositioning, is two things. #1, get to the highest rung possible. And #2, once we're there, prevent anyone else from climbing above us, climbing over us, stepping on our heads. The ladder of influence is really, really, really important. It's a different ladder. It still uses the concept of a ladder to illustrate. But what this is going to show you is the relative power of different types of perception moments or micro experiences that can affect how somebody forms a belief. And you want to think about this in direct relationship to your specific target customers and clients. Because every level of the ladder of influence conveys either a stronger or a weaker signal that can plant or confirm or solidify or dispel a perception on the way to becoming a belief. And every level on the ladder of influence has some value. Some just have a lot more value than others. So we want to try to identify as we go through this, where do we have the opportunity to engage and deploy the strongest levels of influence as opposed to the weaker levels of influence? Because the more higher level experience moments, influence moments, perception moments that you can exert and cause to happen in the mind of your target, the faster you're going to impact how they make their buying decisions. And that has a direct, absolutely correlative result with how big and how successful your results are going to be. So here we have another ladder. And at the very top rung of this ladder, we have direct personal experience. Direct personal experience is by far the strongest type of influence that can be exerted on our target. So let's say that, for example, I was traveling to a city that I've never been to before, and maybe even a foreign city in a country I've never been to before. And a friend says, let's go try some of the local food. There's a great restaurant. Okay. So we go to this restaurant, and this restaurant has a specialty, something that I've never eaten before in my life, something I probably never would have chosen to eat. And maybe it is braised. I'm going to make this absurdly absurd. Maybe it's braised aardvark tail. That's the local specialty. Okay, well, I've certainly never had braised aardvark tail, but I'm willing to try it. So we have it, and oh man, is it awful. It's tough. It tastes terrible. It gave me indigestion. I could barely get a bite down. Well, that's a direct personal experience that I have with braised aardvark tail. What do you think is going to happen the next time I would go to a restaurant where they're serving braised aardvark tail? Not choosing it. On a more serious example level, the direct personal experience is the strongest level of influence possible. I'm shopping for a new laptop. I go to my local computer store, and they've got a dozen different laptops on display. What am I going to do? I'm going to open each one. I'm going to play with the keyboard. I'm going to look at the resolution of the screen. I'm going to see how fast it loads, right? That's a direct personal experience. I'm actually trying it. And as I try it, I'm going to say, I don't like the way this keyboard feels. So I'm eliminating that particular laptop as a viable option. And on this laptop, the colors really look dull on the screen. So my direct personal experience looking at it, not going to buy that laptop. Our own direct personal experiences are the strongest influences that we have. If we do something that we absolutely love, we're going to want to do it again. If we do something that we absolutely get displeasure from, we're not going to want to do it again. When we think about the competitive challenge of taking a client away from another agency or from another brand preference, if we can get them to doubt or be dissatisfied with their actual personal experience, that's going to motivate them a lot more strongly than any other type of influence. And if our brand or our product is all it's cracked up to be, what we want them to do is we want them to, quote unquote, put their fingers on our keyboard. We want them to try it. We want them to touch it, smell it, feel it, use it, experience it, because that personal experience cannot be replicated. So if we have an opportunity to create a direct personal experience, that's number one on our hit list. How can we do that? Well, we can offer a free trial, or 7 days you can try this, or whatever it is that we have to do to create a direct personal experience gives us the strongest possible level of influence that we can exert. Now, what if we can't stimulate a direct personal experience? Well, one level down in terms of its power would be input from what we call a most trusted source. And a most trusted source could be a very good friend who's made recommendations to you in the past that worked out wonderfully. Hey, Bob, I'm going to be in Chicago next week. I've never been there. What's the best seafood restaurant? And Bob's always given me great advice on restaurants. So when Bob says, oh, you want to go to the Lakeshore Sea Grill, Bob is a most trusted source because I have had direct personal experiences resulting from his recommendations. So it's not quite a direct personal experience because I haven't gone to the Lakeshore Sea Grill yet, but I trust this source based on past experience. That's pretty good proxy. And the odds are that if that trusted source has been the reason I've had positive direct personal experiences in the past, likely to have them again. So I'm likely to be highly influenced by that most trusted source. For example, in the world of Facebook advertising, there are some well-known personalities who are considered the gurus of Facebook advertising. Imagine if you had one of them, if you're a Facebook ad agency, if you had one of them giving you a direct testimonial or a video testimonial from one of the most looked up to and respected people in the industry, that could be considered a most trusted source. So there are ways to exert the most trusted source influence in almost every one of our businesses. If we can't get a most trusted source, maybe we can deploy some kind of influence from a trusted source. Who would be a trusted source? Well, a trusted source might be something like, I'm looking for a restaurant, and I remember that Gordon Ramsay went to this particular restaurant and loved it, raved about it. I don't know Gordon Ramsay personally. He's not my most trusted source, but he certainly accorded the recognition as one of the best chefs and gourmets in the world. So Gordon Ramsay says, this is by far the best restaurant in New Orleans or in Singapore, pretty likely to tend to believe it. So that's a trusted source. Input from a prominent source, and this is a little bit of a hybrid here. Gordon Ramsay could easily be construed as a prominent source, but prominent sources could also be other big names in your field or other big clients in your field. Maybe your target doesn't really know them personally, so they can't be considered a trusted source, but maybe the client knows of the company they work for. So if I have a recommendation or a testimonial on my website from the brand strategy director for some big name company, the readers of my website may not know that guy's name or that woman's name, but they've heard the name of the company. So that's a prominent source. And then further down the list, we have input from a commercial intent source. All advertisements fall into commercial intent. Influencers, right? There's a lot of movement about influencer marketing. Kim Kardashian held up my product on her Instagram. I don't know her personally. But what I do know is she's likely getting paid a lot of money to show that product. So do I really trust it a lot? The point of this ladder of influence is to say that we want very, very much to try to offer our targets a direct personal experience through trying something, seeing how it goes, getting a free report or a free audit from us, or a sample of our ads, so they can actually feel it and touch it and look at it and hold it. Because the closer we can get in our marketing and our messaging to giving our target an actual experience moment, that's as strong as we're going to get. If we can't do that, let's try to deploy the most trusted sources. If we can't do that, let's look at who would be considered trusted sources. And then who would be considered prominent sources, or what would be considered a prominent source. Maybe a particular as seen on NBC, CBS, Fox, BBC, CBC, wherever you are in the world. There are a lot of ways to massage this ladder of influence. And we want to try to stay away as much as possible from feeling commercial. And we do this by not talking about ourselves, by not hyping our product or our brand or our service, but rather we focus on our target's needs, their pain points, their problems, their desires, what they're looking to fulfill. Because we know that perceptions create beliefs and beliefs dictate behaviors. And the behaviors we want are buy, hire us, click here, try this, share this, advocate for us, refer us, respond, sign up. Whatever the buying action is that we want, we have to get ahead of it. We have to influence our targets to move in that direction. We know beliefs are hard to change unless we can shake up the foundation that created that belief. And we do this, again, with what? The two critical movers, doubt and dissatisfaction. And now we layer on top of that doubt and dissatisfaction the strongest possible level of influence to cement it. I create doubt, I provoke dissatisfaction, and I give you a direct personal experience with my product or my service or my brand or my agency or my consultancy. You've all seen me in the Facebook groups where I'll say, let's get on a call together and I'll help you out. That's a direct personal experience with me. And it works. These people get to overcome their hesitation. Well, who is this guy? Is he an idiot? Is he going to try to hard sell me on 15 upsells? No, I'm actually going to sit and work with you and I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to help you and I'm not going to try to upsell you. Well, it's a direct personal experience. It's very positive. We know that perceptions are easier to influence than beliefs. But when it comes to getting competitive advantage, when it comes to deploying tactically your positioning and your depositioning, perceptions plus influences are the entire ball game. This is what it comes down to. Perceptions can well be thought of as micro events, where you have a series of micro events that convey a message. It could be something you read, your target reads, or hears about. And because these perceptions are micro events, and because different levels of influence have different power structures in motivating a future decision, we need to understand the nature of how perceptions are received and interpreted, because they're not all received the same way, and the brain doesn't process them all the same way. And to do this, we use two approaches. First, we define the specific steps by which consumers receive and then interpret these messages, these micro moments, something they read, something they hear, something they see, something they touch. And we use that to map out a very specific decision-making process flow. Perception can very often be an unconscious process going on where you're taking in sensory information from your environment. And we're bombarded with sensory input. I'm scrolling down news sites and I'm reading my emails and I'm looking at Facebook and I'm seeing ads and posts and Instagram and people are talking to me and my phone rings. We're constantly bombarded by sensory input. And we use that as it comes in. We have a couple of options. We can toss it right away. I can see an ad for, let me think about something. I can see an ad for fountain pens. You know what? I'm not a fountain pen guy. So yeah, maybe they look good. Maybe they're classic, whatever. Next, the sensory input came in. It wasn't relevant, out, gone. Other sensory input, piece of information I see, might be very relevant. I'm always looking for new interesting ties. So I see an ad for ties. Wow, that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll go to their website. So we use all the sensory input that we get, and we construct our own version of reality. But because perceptions happen mostly unconsciously, like in nanoseconds, they're very prone to being manipulated. Now, this can be for the good or the not so good. And just look at the world around us and what's on your television screens and on your social media. I'm not going to get down the political rabbit hole. But you see the power here. And this is leading us to the point in this master course where we're going to talk about weaponization of marketing. But something doesn't have to be factually true to have an impact. So we want to create our perception of reality. We want to put in the mind of our target the vision that we want them to have about our brand. And this can be a combination of talking to them through messages, through emails, through marketing, through our website, through ads, but also through their influencers. Because if somebody who runs a giant Facebook group posts, by the way, I want to give a big shout out to Marty. His brand strategy is just amazing. And you really need, wow. That person who runs this giant Facebook group is an influencer, right? They have influence to their members and they're recommending me. So to their members, they may be a prominent or a most trusted source. Again, this pushes our targets in our favor and away from the competition, to us, away from everyone else. And the way that influencing factors impact perceptions include your past experiences, right? The direct experiences, your assumptions and your expectations. Oh my God, that's going to be terrible. Oh, wow, I can't wait. Character traits, your education, your level of learning, your level of knowledge in a given subject. What's your upbringing like? What's your concept of self? What culture do you come from? What are your values in life? What are your preconceived notions? What are your present circumstances? And most importantly, what are your needs and your pain points and your desires? If you look at all of these from the lens of your target, some people say this is creating your avatar, right, of your ideal client. This is just data points. They give you a better picture, a fuller jigsaw puzzle that you can start to see what types of influences and what types of messages are going to resonate best with your target. Not everybody sees the same thing the same way. So here, read this quickly. A bird in the hand. Read this quickly. You know, about 70% of people read this as once in a lifetime, but it isn't. It's actually once in a lifetime. Because most people see what they expect to see. If you're scrolling down Facebook and you see ads, or if I'm reading emails and I see headlines, my preconceived expectations of what the from is and the email subject line, or what the ad image is before I've even seen the headline, I get this preconceived notion and I'm already predisposed in favor or not in favor. So we need to be really careful. That's positioning. That's depositioning. What you perceive is also based very strongly on your past direct experiences. You went to a friend's party last week, and it was insanely boring. So you're predisposed to think that this friend's next party is pretty likely to be boring also. This guy doesn't know how to throw a party. Preconceived notions are important to understand when we craft our positioning and our depositioning messages to our targets. Perceptions are also easily interfered with due to prior conditioning. So say these words as you look at them, say them out loud. Red, green, blue, yellow. It's actually a little bit uncomfortable because that's not red, that's green. And even though the word says green, it's orange. And even though the word says yellow, it's blue. And that interferes with our prior conditioning because our eyes are saying one thing and our mind is saying another. So here's a discomforting disconnect. We can use this to our advantage, or we can get sucked into this to our disadvantage. And we're going to have a whole lesson on this. Expectation is so deeply embedded in the human experience that it's not easy to turn it off. And there are multiple factors that influence how people perceive things, but the process really has 3 stages. We recognize that there's information coming in. Incoming. Mentally, we're already prepared to kind of process that information, right? To organize it. Garbage bin, recycle bin, archive it for later, act on it now. We have these buckets. And how do we interpret that information? It's really important. It's not so important. It's meaningless. I don't believe it at all. And in positioning and depositioning, when we write our positioning platforms, when we create our category classes, we need to be extremely precise. Every word matters. And we need to be extremely clear and unambiguous. This is why things like the best are useless, because what the best of something is to me is not the same as what the best of that thing is to you. And we need to make it as easy as possible. Remember, we only have a few moments for those messages to be inputted, received, processed, and interpreted. We want to make this as easy as possible, because the exact same information said to 2 different targets, or 3 or 10, can result in absolutely dramatically different interpretations. The person in the left side of this image is clearly seeing the numeral 6. The person on the right side of this image is clearly seeing the numeral 9. They're both right. So this is a bit of a cute way of saying we have to be careful about what we say and how we say it and how we convey it, because it could be interpreted differently by different audiences. And even if the audience is the same type of target, our same demographic, our same avatar, our same ideal client, they may have different preconceived notions. They may have a different history of direct personal experiences. They may see exactly what we're putting out differently. You've all seen these. Is the cube on the left coming out at you or receding behind you? Is the image on the right a vase, or is it the outline of 2 men's faces looking at each other? We need to be very careful in positioning to be unambiguous. If we craft our positioning platform and we reread it and we see that something might be open to multiple interpretation, we haven't done it right. And this is why we need to see everything that we do not with our own eyes. We have to look from the outside in, from our target's point of view, from their needs, their pain points, their expectations, because we need to avoid this trap of selective perception, the process by which consumers let information in or screen it out, and the messages that come with it. Everything that we see is at minimum an opinion, right? Everything your targets read is at minimum an opinion, not necessarily a fact. And that's why all of our positioning platforms must include provability, and depositioning that is accurate and validatable. Because consumers and clients will selectively perceive what they will ultimately classify as applying to their needs or their wants or their desires. Next time, we're going to talk about brand positioning traps. I'm going to show you a couple of them. The brand extension trap. We need to be careful of that one as we create our category classes. The strapline trap, which is really cool. I'm going to show you some updated examples. And we're going to get into the concept of controlling the consumer and client decision-making process. So that's next session. Don't miss it. With that, I'm going to say thank you very, very much for joining me today. I hope this was an interesting lesson. I hope you saw an opportunity to take a fresh look at your own messaging and your own advertising and your own marketing, and understand that there are ways that you can make it stronger by increasing the level of influence that you bring to bear. And there are ways that you can make it stronger by reducing the ambiguity that multiple parties may see it and interpret it differently. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today on the Master Course.